All right. Chat. Q&A. All right, sounds good. Hello, everyone. Today I have attorney Allison from BashamShah.com, the same law group where attorney Rashmi Shah, most of you have been talking to her, consulting along with attorney Murli Basham. Attorney Allison is a family immigration law specialist and removal proceedings. One of the hot topics is about the recent ICE arrest of 15 foreign students. And what do you do if in case an officer wants to come and talk to you? And also to give an example of the law practices and the areas what Basham Shah covers. So for the first 10-15 minutes or so, people who are watching the Facebook live stream will get to know about Allison. If you have any questions, you'll be able to schedule a call and talk to her. And after that, when you go to the Q&A session, the stream will be only for the members who are in the Zoom call. Allison, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here with you today.
Thank you. So I have known Attorney Murli Basham and Rashmi for a long time, and they have told me about family immigration questions. We have a great attorney on our team, Allison. You have to come and talk to her. And we had a lot of questions about family immigration, folks who are an F1 or OPT applying for through family immigration. Are they getting married through a permanent resident or a citizen? And then they have questions about what happens to my 485 or things. And Murli always tell, talk to Allison. We have no idea how the family immigration works. So thank you for being here, and thank you for helping us today with your questions and answers. Tell me about yourself. What's your background? How did you get into the immigration law?
So I've been practicing immigration law for about 8 years now. I am in North Carolina where I'm licensed. I'm a board certified specialist. So it's an extra exam and an extra level of just recognition. So I've always practiced immigration law. I went to law school to do that. Primarily when I was in undergrad and in my university studies, I had the opportunity to travel quite a bit. And it really opened my eyes. Obviously, I'm an American born in the United States. And I don't have a personal immigration story through my family, but was just very honored to learn more about immigrants, about why people chose to come to the United States. And I wanted to use my education and background to be able to help people really, whatever version of the American dream that they have found, help them accomplish that. I am bilingual, I speak Spanish, so I do represent quite a few individuals in the Hispanic population from Central and South America, but of course, I do represent people from around the world, and I really love that, my job helps me to learn so much more about other cultures and customs and individuals.
All right. So you are specialized in family immigration and removal proceedings.
Yes.
What does removal proceeding mean?
So removal proceedings is kind of the fancy way of saying deportation. So under our immigration laws, we don't actually deport people. That term was taken out of our law. We remove them. So when an attorney says that they do removal proceedings, they represent individuals in fighting their deportation. So sometimes that means just helping them navigate through the process. A lot of people do have defenses to fight their deportation, like in a criminal setting, you would raise defenses to not being guilty of a crime. So I help individuals apply for those sorts of defenses. Or again, sometimes people unfortunately don't have any options, but you can at least navigate them through the system, advocate on their behalf, sometimes help by time, or, in order for an individual to maybe maintain status or not fall out of status, you can try to escalate the proceedings a little bit faster so they're leaving without triggering other immigration problems, which may help them in the future. So removal proceedings is kind of a very broad, but it can go from communicating with ICE on behalf of an individual all the way through appearing in court on behalf of someone, filing appeals, really the litigation aspect of immigration and deportation.
Okay, so the readers who are the listeners who are listening to this are typically students who are on F1, OPT, H1B, or H4, those status. Mm-hmm. Most of the times they deal with questions to Murali or Rashmi, asking about how do we file H1B visa, I have questions about this. But when it comes to different departments, where does ICE fall under this category? And how does ICE relate to DHS and USCIS? If you can explain that, people can understand what's the role of ICE, DHS, and USCIS.
Absolutely. So DHS is the Department of Homeland Security. They're the federal agency or the federal department that encompasses most of immigration. And I say most because we have the Department of State that involves the consulates abroad when you're applying for visas, visa stamping. But everything else, if you're inside the United States, you're dealing with DHS. So within that, we have three main immigration agencies. USCIS, which is the affirmative benefits. So that's where you're filing your changes of status, your H1, your extensions, whatever that may be. You have ICE, which stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So they are the enforcement agency, or the police, if you will, the immigration police. So it is their job to investigate and locate individuals who are violating their statuses. They also have bigger investigations into companies, for example, which, these four companies have kind of come under, companies that employ unauthorized, immigrants without authorization, all sorts of things like that. They're the enforcement arm. And then our third agency is CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, which again, they do have an enforcement side as well, but they control the comings and goings of people at the border and at airports. So ICE is, so those three agencies operate within DHS, and ICE is just the enforcement side. Once you've been admitted and you're here, they are there to make sure everyone's maintaining status. And if not, if they find out that you're not, they have the authority to place you into the deportation proceedings and walk you through that process.
Okay. So how is ICE police different from regular police that we see on the streets or the police department?
So ICE only has authority in terms of immigration violations. So they don't have the authority necessarily to stop any individual. They can't issue you a speeding ticket or anything like that. That's dealt with local police and state police. So ICE exclusively exists, again, in terms of dealing with immigrants, finding those who are violating immigration laws, and working through the process that exists to place them into deportation proceedings and deport them. So sometimes you will hear, though, of ICE stopping people on the street and asking to see paperwork. They want to see visas. There is a law that allows ICE officers to operate that way within 100 miles of the US border. In our current administration, they're doing that quite a bit more, but that's a bigger issue in, the states that border Texas, for example, all of Florida, things like that, where there are high. So that's not something, at least in North Carolina, where my office is, ICE does not operate that way yet anyways. So they have a field office in Atlanta. So again, I'm going to speak more generally to how ICE operates in North Carolina because that is where I'm located. So they have a field office in Atlanta and a sub office in Charlotte, North Carolina. And then they have smaller little offices peppered throughout my area in Raleigh. So basically they will get some sort of target. They always have, different missions, if you will, similar to police having like a gang task force or a drug task force. So there's a task force working on this F1 fraud issue right now, and they're identifying individuals who have either been complicit or victims in that scheme. And that's what it appears they're doing right now with these 15 individuals. So they're locating where they're at through either USCIS filings or other, the SEVIS system. They're locating these individuals and they're going to question them, which is all within the purview of their authority. So any immigrant in the United States, that they have reason to believe has done something, has violated a status or fallen out of status, they do have the ability to go and question that individual if they want.
Okay. In the press conference that was hosted by ICE a few days back to announce the 15 arrests, what's the difference between the 15 who got arrested? And they mentioned that the visa has been revoked for about 700 or so, notification has been sent, and they have 1,100 folks in general who are going to lose the status. So in general, what's the difference between those 15 who got arrested and others, the status will be revoked? What's the difference between those two?
So that's a great question. And unfortunately, a lot of times it depends on luck. So if there's 1,100 people that are kind of caught up in this issue that have violated their status, that have committed this fraud, any one of those could be detained by ICE for that action. However, a lot of times it comes down to resources by ICE. Where are they operating? Do they have bed space available? So when we're talking about detaining an individual, they have to take them to an ICE detention facility that, again, are peppered throughout the United States. And that's where they would put someone. They can't put someone on the next plane back to their home country. Individuals that have been admitted have due process rights and, get to have their day in court and all of that. So they can decide to detain someone. But a lot of times it does come down to kind of luck or timing. There may be a bed available in a state, that it's easier to transport a detainee there, whereas elsewhere they may just stop by and question you because it's going to cost them more money. They don't have a bed available. There's actually a federal bed mandate. So there is a contract that ICE has with the federal government that they detain. I believe the number is 36,000 individuals around the country. So again, sometimes we see there will be some individuals that are just released because they need to make that, like, non-violent, non-criminal detainees are released because they need to make space for a violent, criminal offender. So a lot of it does come down to luck, and it's really hard to kind of guess and say exactly why this individual was detained when this next person was just questioned and sent on their way. But the fact of the matter is, if you are, a part of this, you've fallen out of status, you've worked for one of these companies, the possibility does exist that they can come and knock on your door and arrest you. And that's why it's really important to understand, if ICE does approach you, what your rights are in that scenario. Because I find a lot of people, ICE has a very nice and a very smooth way of talking. I don't know if anyone out there has seen, there was a documentary put on Netflix this year called Immigration Nation. And I've only seen the first episode, but it actually kind of highlights their operations when they knock on doors. And they're very smooth talkers, and they have a way of, well, we just want to ask you a couple questions. And that could end up with you walking away in handcuffs. So it's really important that you understand what an individual understands what their rights are in this scenario, so that they're not offering more information or giving ICE a reason to arrest them, because that reason exists regardless of what they do or don't say.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop the stream on the Facebook, and we will go only Zoom. We got a lot of attendees on Zoom. So my next follow-up question for you, Allison, is you mentioned that the 4 companies, they did not specifically tell these are the 4 companies that we are investigating. I was trying to listen to the press conference. They said we identified a company, we got 168 leads, and then we reached out. So is there any other information that we can tell these are the typical 4 companies that are involved in this, at least they're looking at for right now?
Unfortunately not. ICE, they're being very selective with the information they're putting out there, as would any kind of police agency in an investigation. They're not just investigating individuals, but these companies, and it's a bigger kind of thing that they're looking into. So, us attorneys have all the same information that's released by these press conferences and these releases. So we don't really have more information, unfortunately, aside from what's already been put out there.
Okay. All right. You mentioned about ICE will come and talk to you. You may end up going in handcuffs. And also there is 1,100 people who could be also detained. Is there a way for them to know how that 1,100 was selected? They have spoken to all, or what's the process they typically go through to tell, okay, these 1,100 are the folks who really violated, others were a kind of victim. So what could they have done?
So really nothing, unfortunately. Like I said, sometimes it comes down to luck. It comes down to what that individual ICE sub-field office has going on in that moment. If they're in an area where there's a lot of criminal activity, the ICE officers are probably a lot busier. They've always prioritized criminal offenders, immigrants that are in the country breaking our criminal laws, as trying to deport those individuals. So sometimes I have seen that ICE simply gets bored. Here in North Carolina, so for a long time in Raleigh, where our office is located, our local sheriff cooperated with ICE in terms of when someone was arrested criminally, they would automatically be turned over. Our ICE had an actual local office within the Wake County Jail in Raleigh. So meaning as soon as an immigrant got detained for a criminal purpose, ICE was right there to get them. So that contract actually stopped 2 years ago, where our county no longer cooperates with ICE. So I notice ICE is a little bit bored here. They don't have this easy pathway to all of these criminal offenders. So we've noticed that in the last 2 years, they're doing a lot more raids. They're going into the communities where, we're in big farming community out here in North Carolina. So they're going in, they're looking into E-Verify, they're looking into companies, social security numbers or things not matching up, and they're trying to find undocumented immigrants that way. So again, there's no way, you can't call ICE and ask if you're on the list of someone that they're coming to look to, because again, it's very arbitrary. And I know that doesn't give, for all of you listening, I know that doesn't give you a lot of, peace or calm